Yeah, yesterday there was pardon, this is the TC39-TG3 meeting on Wednesday, July 17th of 2024. And I'm proposing that we talk about various little holes like the first one that Nicolo found, where there appears to be something akin to dynamic scoping in play for which script context to evaluate various things in. Um, the the example that Andrea put together yesterday was promise resolve with a string that contains dynamic import syntax, then being passed to then, which goes to an eval. I think that the only correct interpretation of eval in that context is to grab the eval from lexical scope and use the corresponding function. The semantics that I believe are correct, which are coherent with the proposal we want to make for evaluators, is that the eval function itself has an internal slot for the environment record, and if you follow from the environment record, you eventually find a script context, and that script context would give you a refer URL if there is one. It might be null, under which you would evaluate the dynamic import, or under which you would resolve the module specifier for the dynamic import.
Could we share the example that was shown that might help us reason about this?
Yes, I'm going to use the WebEx chat. This is the example that Andrew provided. And I have not dug into this. I have not figured out.
Does WebEx chat get recorded on the video?
Almost certainly not.
Could you please project the line of code? Or somebody please project it now that it's on chat and anybody could?
Let me, I'm going to open up a Vim, paste the line of code, and set language JavaScript, and no, that didn't work. Whatever.
Oh, I see Nicolo is here.
Hi.
Hi.
All right. I'll, primitive as it is, I'll try to get this shared.
What Chris is looking for this string, there are by the way two different things going on in this example. Because like one is that eval actually, dynamic import actually traverses the call stack to decide where to resolve from, rather than do it just syntactically. And this is something I'm going to present in the next meeting. And then the other thing is that while traversing this call stack, when it reaches the root of the call stack, because like in this case, there is a sync code, so it reaches the root before reaching a syntactical module. In a case, the browser, HTML is providing to that async root some context through attaching data to the promised job, and that was done on purpose because HTML needed it also for other things. I don't know exactly for what. So for this specific example, if we change eval to, if we change dynamic import to only determine the resolution base syntactically, so the referrer syntactically, then regardless of what HTML does, this example would resolve example.mjs, not relative to this module that Chris is projecting on screen, but relative to whatever the base URL for the realm is.
Yeah, and I think that the base URL for the realm is the behavior I am expecting based off of evaluators. Is that consistent with your expectation?
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Okay, cool. We're on the same page. Let me read what Andrew said is the other half of what they do seems to be making it so that dynamic import in the expression projected resolves relative to the script active when the promised job is unqueued. What does, so my interpretation of that is that
Yep, I can explain what that means.
Yeah.
So when you run eval has some like active scriptor module that is the script of module or module that called eval.
Can
In this
I
case,
I want to clarify some things
yes,
right there. So the spec is makes some things very hard to reason about because it tries to reuse most of the same spec code, the spec pseudocode for both dynamic eval and direct eval. And they're, in fact, two complete, should be understood as two completely different constructs that have, for most purposes, almost nothing in common. Direct eval has to be understood in terms of the lexical scope of the code calling it. Dynamic eval is supposed to be, and in all ways other than bizarre examples like this, clearly is a function call. And the function call is insensitive to the caller, and the semantics of the function is insensitive to the caller, so that you have the normal algebra that if you call it indirect through another intermediary, it doesn't change the semantics. What in the line of code being shown, clearly this is an indirect eval, an indirect dynamic eval, so it should have only the semantics of a function call, in which case it's up to the function, irrespective of any dynamic context, to interpret the string, to evaluate the string being passed to it. And therefore, only the function's captured context could be brought to bear on how to interpret the string. So does that split between how to think about dynamic and direct eval make sense everywhere else in the language? And would that have been the right coherent way to understand this one as well?
yes. So here we're only talking about like dynamic eval or indirect eval. That unfortunately is not really just a function call because it captures some context from the caller that ideally should be fixed to not capture.
So when you say that dynamic eval captures context from the caller, is there any observable?
Yes, it captures the referrer for imports. So if you have a dynamic import inside eval, eval captures the referrer from where it is, from where eval is called.
Is that
do we agree
that's insane.
Do we agree that's a bug?
I mean, just to make it very clear, as to why this like breaks all sorts of algebraic properties of the language, if A calls B, and B is just a pass-through wrapper of dynamic eval, and then B calls dynamic eval, or indirect eval. I'm going to call it indirect. Dynamic is just a bad term. I'm sorry I introduced that. So A calls B, where B is just intended to be a transparent pass-through wrapper of indirect eval, then this has the normal dynamic scoping bug that the dynamic eval will use B's context, right? Whereas since it's just a transparent wrapper, if, for example, by the normal algebra of such things, if something optimized away the transparent wrapper, turned A's call into a call to indirect eval directly, then the semantics would change. Is that all correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, and by the way, I'm gonna add it later today to the agenda. I'm gonna present this and propose a fix at this plenary.
Right.
So you're covering this issue within the larger issue that you've already proposed to discuss that's related to this?
It's exactly this.
It's exactly this. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, great.
So in this example screen, there are, however, two things going on. Because there are some functions, such as, unfortunately, right now in Dart eval that do some dynamic scoping. Like in this case, eval is capturing the referrer. It's not the only function on the web platform that does dynamic scoping. For example, there is a setter on location.href. Is a setter that uses the caller realm to decide how to resolve the new page location when you set it. So what like HTML uses, like promise jobs, whatever they're called, like attaches metadata of them to in general pass these like context needed for the dynamic scoping. So when in the case of eval, it's passing all the info needed to get the caller referrer, or in the case, like if in the then callback here, we were to pass the location of the href setter, like the setter function, which is like just a web platform function, not into 6.2, but still it uses promise jobs to pass data about whoever called promise.resolve to then know who was the real calling that location, that href setter. So the like fixing eval would like fix this specific example on screen, but there are still cases in which promise.resolve will forward some context.
But this is the
or
only
the callback
case.
to them.
Is there any other case that affects any built-in JavaScript, in any part of the
No,
JavaScript standard?
this is the only one.
Okay.
This also, I mean, the mechanism is the same mechanism that async context depends upon to transfer fluid scope, right?
Yes.
It can't be.
Right. I mean, no. Effectively, what it does, it's the web creates an async, the equivalent of an async context variable, and uses it to transfer the what is it? The settings object that captures what's.
Well, yes, but it's not just that. Because like the web has some magic for it to work synchronously. Like if you set location to href synchronously, for example, and like then it uses something like async context to also extend that sync magic to also the async case. But just async context by itself is not enough to replicate the web behavior.
Fascinating. In any case, is there, do you expect any controversy? I don't think that there's any controversy. Well, for one, is there any controversy on how to fix this on the call?
On this call today?
For people who are present.
So, I mean, I think we're all agreed on what the preferred fix is, but the controversy would be whether, if the preferred fix is incompatible with what browsers currently do, then there's the political issue that we need to anticipate.
Yeah. So what controversies are we anticipating from folks who are not on the call?
So what I will propose is like we remove dynamic scoping from eval, but like we don't express an opinion about the other dynamic scoping cases the web platform has. So that like we let them do whatever weird things they want with their legacy setters.
Okay.
I like this strategy because I feel that it would be. I do not want the fates of all of these cases to be coupled.
Okay. So the web platform, which was already beyond our rescue, remains corrupt, but we quarantine the corruption from the JavaScript language.
I mean, so talking about quarantining, there are some questions in chat about import meta. The thing is that basically this is really a problem anywhere where the host can affect some behavior that is intrinsic to 262. Dynamic import, eval, import meta are all things that are part of the language but that are controlled by the host. Is there anything else like that the setting of the object like that, or this propagation might impact. And so in particular, I am not familiar enough with all the behaviors of import meta that are like at this point considered part of the ecosystem. Is there anything in there?
I can say that. Go ahead, Nicolo.
You cannot pass import meta. Like eval will throw if you try to evaluate. Eval evaluates scripts, and import meta is only available in modules, so you cannot observe import meta specifically from any eval.
Not automatically eval, but like, is there any value impacted by import meta that might be affected by somehow this propagation?
Thank you. That's specifically how I wanted to word it.
Ellie asked about base URLs. That does not apply in this particular case, right? By the time the module is, by the time the import is called inside the module, the URLs are already resolved. Is that correct?
Well, if you're evaling, you're going back to the realms resolution. And the realms resolution, I believe, is impacted by base URL on the web.
That's my understanding as well.
So it is affected. So base URI is something that we need to consider.
Specifically, the fix that we are proposing will make this program sensitive to the base URL of the realm, because it will take that into account when resolving example MJS.
The example we're take into account the base URL of which realm?
The realm attached to the eval function that is in lexical scope.
Okay, thank you.
What about access to things like shared array buffer? Is there any variation of this that exercises difference there?
I believe that's some property of the agent.
Okay, so likely not.
Richard, what kind of entanglement with shared array buffer are you thinking about?
So if I remember correctly, it's controlled by CSP and also a shared document domain.
What about shared array buffer is controlled by those things?
Whether that functionality is available.
Okay.
I don't think that should be affected by your base URI or by similar features.
So I mean, whether isn't that determined when the realm is initiated? Initialized. I mean, when the global of the realm is initialized, is you know, if it's a realm with a shared array buffer or without a shared array buffer, that all has to be decided by the time the global is populated.
This goes into browsers, but I wanted to mention that the origin of the realm and the current base URI can be separate and different, and the security implications are more related to the origin of the realm.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was wondering about.
Yeah, like you can change your base URI after a page loads to be a completely separate website, but it doesn't affect the security the core security of your site.
That is different from what I just heard Mark say, right? He said that it captures the base URI.
The base URI that is inherently implicitly there that informs the origin, but then so it's like it can change afterwards is what I'm getting at.
I just be clear. I wasn't saying one way or the other with regard to whether the base URI is captured or what captures it or time of capture or anything. I was just talking about with regard to shared array buffer. By the time the global is initialized and observable, it either has or does not have a shared array buffer. Is the only point I was making.
The base URL is like fixed. Like even if you change the import meta URL, that does not affect the internal base URL used to to resolve anything or to verify any property of the page of the real.
That's correct. They are separate.
Okay, so I think I'm hearing that's not an interesting avenue to pursue.
The shared array buffer avenue?
Right. And I, I was looking for other interactions of the language with
Okay.
browser capability.
Yeah, to confirm, I think, Eli, when you say base URI, you mean the URI or base URL. You're meaning the URL that can be altered by using the base href tag, right?
And all their lesser known methods, but yes, yeah, the node, when I say node, sorry, the DOM node base URI interface is what I'm referring to, part of DOM documents, not part of JavaScript.
Yeah, so I
But
actually don't know off of the top of my head whether the script context whether the referrer is coupled to that. It probably is. But and yeah, that is separate from origin, but that's another thing. Yeah, I don't think, but what the behavior that we are proposing is that the code up here resolve example.mjs relative to the script context associated with the environment record that is an internal slot of the eval function that is in the lexical scope of this program, which may or may not be sensitive to the DOM base URI. If it is, then it is. That's the web.
I feel like it should be, except for like in like a module worker, stuff like that. Even then, actually, you know what? The more I think about it, the more I don't know about how it should affect workers.
In any case, the interesting question, I think, so Nicolo, you did a bunch of work to establish that a whole bunch of these dynamic scoping behaviors for dynamic import and indirect eval and its cousins and function constructors, etc., are not consistently implemented across browsers. And I think that anticipates the resistance that we might see from plenary to changing this behavior, because this can't be web. This can't break the web. The web does not yet agree on the appropriate behavior here. Is that right?
Of all the cases, there are, I think, some cases that behave the same in all three browsers. Like, it very much depends on exactly what is the shape of your code. And if you slightly change the shape, then you can get different behaviors in different browsers. So it's like, it's likely that this will be web compatible.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm glad I brought this up, but I'm especially glad that this is that you have already got this material in the presentation you're planning to present at plenary, and with that, I'm satisfied that we've run this topic to ground.
There's one general tactic that I want to bring up that I'm glad it sounds like we don't have to resort to for this case, but it's just a tactic that we should have in mind, is that the weird interactions, according to the language spec, of realms that are directly in contact with each other already have weird bleeding cases, like what happens if there's no target specified in a reflect.construct call. What's the default target? What target does it default to? And there's a bunch of things like that just cause object references to bleed between realms that are in direct contact with each other. And it was in reaction to that we all agreed that the language-supported realm creation proposal, the shadow realms, have the callable boundary so that realms in that case are never indirect object-object contact. So for a lot of these things, if if you're in a scenario where the only realms are shadow realms, or the only realm contacts are contacts through the callable boundary, some of these pathologies can't occur realm to realm because of the lack of direct contact. And then there's the, and what that enables us to do is, in proposing the compartment semantics, is ensure that compartments are properly lexically managed, irrespective of realm-to-realm insanity in the spec, because the compartments are targeted at use cases that can be rational in the scenarios where there's no direct realm-to-realm contact.
Reminds me that a long while back we had a realm-to-realm, like same origin iframe. There was an existing realm-to-realm interaction for promise scheduling that was inconsistent between then and finally.
There's still a bunch of issues like that. There's still a bunch of issues on what the, there's still a bunch of issues there. And actually there's a lot of difference in implementations between implementations.
Okay, so let's double check this. Is it the case that for all of those weird cases as well, if there is no direct realm-to-realm contact, if there's only contact through the callable boundary, then those irregularities cannot be observable?
We'll have to check because you can pass functions. So since you can have functions are going through the callable boundary, if one of these functions is used, we'll have to double check.
Okay. Okay, so
there were some very weird behaviors there.
Okay.
I have a GIST somewhere that has a bunch of test cases, and I'll have to get back to it someday.
We'll also have to look into how this interacts with evaluators, because though there's nothing observable today, I think evaluators would make this case and possibly some others have an observable difference based off of currently unobservable internal property chains.
Yeah.
Okay. We had another topic. Right?
Actually, what is the other topic? Sorry. Because there's something somewhat related to this, which is really bringing a lot of confusion, and I don't know if maybe it's something we should discuss in the future, which is in the general idea that the spec may have either the host or the 262 spec may have what seems like global mutable state, which is fine as long as it is not observable through the user code. And the web definitely has a lot of cases where it makes global mutable states observable to user code. But how do we prevent that from bleeding into the 262 spec? And also, how do we provide guidance to proposals explaining that global mutable state observable by user code is a bad idea?
I think this is the same, or at least adjacent to the topic of normatively writing down spec invariants. And there's also another part of this, which is there's some semantics that are written down in a way that it's a complicated theorem, a theorem that's somewhat risky as to whether there's observable global communications channels, and think specifically of the shared symbol registry. The shared symbol registry was carefully designed so that it does not provide a communications channel. I believe that it does not. but it could have been specified in a way that makes it obvious that it does not. And instead, it was specified in terms of global mutable state, and then you have to engage in basically a complex theorem in your head to derive the inability to use it as a communications channel. There might be other such things in the spec, but in general, we should seek to do refactorings of the spec, which are refactorings if there's no observable difference, such that the lack of a global communications channel becomes obvious.
I saw Nicolo's hand go up to Matthew's question.
I'm going to be very similar to Mark's answer. I want to note that there is some work that some delegates are doing about establishing conventions. They're like not being called invariants, but more like how you should validate arguments to functions and things like that. So maybe it might be worth rather than presentation, plenary, trying to add an entry to that list of conventions.
So, sorry, Nicolo, you were cutting off a little bit. And did I understand right that you believe this is a question of guidelines for proposals, or?
Yes. So some of us specifically, like some delegates specifically in this group, like to use the term like variants, but other delegates figured that it's much better to talk about conventions, what we do, like how you should try to write proposals. And there is, I think, in the How We Work repository, growing list of conventions, and like we should probably try to get this global state thing as a state convention for people when they're looking to write new proposals.
Good.
The problem with the convention is that it's not a strong. I feel we should. I think a lot of us here believe that there should never be observable global mutable states in the 262 spec. And saying it's a convention is weaker than there never should be.
I'm going to agree with both of you. I think it needs to be an invariant. It needs to be something where, in order for it to be broken, a new proposal has to explicitly propose to break it. But the thing is, we've been talking about having such invariants for, I think, years now, without anybody actually writing down any normative invariants or proposing them. So the reason I'm agreeing with both of you is it sounds like while we've been procrastinating on writing down our first invariant, that the rest of the committee has been succeeding at writing down a lot of spec guidance. So there's no reason not to do this in two phases. Let's take the path of least resistance immediately, since we can take it immediately, and get the guidance in there, and let's continue to work towards writing down normative invariants.
Yeah, and the neat thing about guidance is that you don't need a vote at plenary to make a recommendation or even make a statement as simple as you can expect resistance if you propose make a proposal that breaks one of these invariants.
Yeah.
I think it would still be.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, I think it would still be good to still present in plenary, like explaining what you mean with global mutable state, and like some examples of like bad old version of proposals and examples of how they've been fixed, so that people know what we're talking about.
I'm always surprised that a lot of people, even in committee, seem to be even open or like considering global mutable state, or not seeing why it's often a bad idea. So I think it's probably on us here to make a strong case for the kind of bugs and issues that observable global mutable state causes.
Yeah, I agree that we should think of that as on us, on TG3 to do that.
I think that's probably enough for this topic. But since it was related to how this came up, I wanted to discuss this really quick. Chris, you mentioned there was another topic on the agenda.
Nicolo, did you bring a topic? I don't recall.
No, actually, I never remember where to find the agenda. But yeah, I have no topics.
Is it linked from the calendar item?
In the calendar, there was an empty HackMD document.
The agendas are usually under GitHub TC39-TG3, and there isn't always one ready-made. Sometimes we have to copy the template whenever we want to start an item. It is a slightly less fluid process than a Google Doc that just gets bigger.
It made a little more sense when the meetings were less frequent. But no, we did not have any agenda in advance. There's the HackMD with the stuff we're talking about today. Unless somebody has something else, the only other topics were just discussing things that are coming up at plenary. We have one more meeting next week, and then hopefully there's more stuff on the agenda by then, but there's some content on the plenary agenda right now. I don't know if there's anything particularly interesting yet for this group anyway.
Point of order, Jordan has a cat that wants to introduce itself.
This is Ginger.
Oh, and it's a ginger.
She's very curious.
How did you think of that name?
The dog is named Mochi, and we wanted to stick with Japanese food, and this is the one that the rest of my family preferred over Sakura.
I was actually making a sarcastic joke, but yeah, like that's it.
Oh yeah, it's unrelated to the red hair exactly. It's sort of yeah, it's like not it's unrelated to the slang for red-haired people at least, but yeah.
Did I correctly see Maine Coon nose on your cat, or is it more?
Not that I know of. I mean, it was a rescued tabby, so
yeah. We also have a large orange rescue tabby that's polydactyl, actually.
Oh wow. Yeah.
Anyhow,
only 5 plus.
Polydactyl. Okay. Let's make sure while we're recording. What is polydactyl?
They're sometimes called Hemingway cats because Hemingway collected polydactyl cats. That means they have an extra finger.
Oh, I had no idea.
Since we're recording, might as well mention my father was a polydactyl. It's a dominant trait and was not inherited. All right, Chris. There was a proposal that you thought merited our attention. I agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, Michael's here. Michael, do you want to talk about your concurrency control proposal?
I don't know if this group would be interested in it.
No,
this group is terrified of concurrency, so I suspect.
Well, and your proposal seems to have a bunch of class instances in it, which is shared mutable states. So there may be some overlap.
You do not have to use classes with the proposal. In fact, you never
Yeah,
have to use classes. Just don't use classes.
Let's pretend that never happened. Yeah.
A very quick summary of it is that a long time ago, we created iterator helpers. Sometime after that, we split out async iterator helpers from iterator helpers because we realized that there's a lot more going on than we originally assumed with async iterator helpers, in that they need to support concurrent iteration, meaning you can call next again after calling next previously before the previous promise has resolved, which leads to like a lot of interesting things. And we should, preserve that property of any iterators that we operate on with async iterator helpers. So we went through like a whole bunch of effort to make sure that we do that, but at the same time, we did not actually insert any support for concurrency. It only preserves any concurrency support that existing underlying iterators have. So this proposal is adding that concurrency support. So that means that what that means is that async iterator helpers is currently concerned with like supporting, like preserving concurrency across transformations like map or like filter or something. But the consuming methods like sum, every, for each, to array, don't do anything concurrently. Every time they next the underlying iterator, they wait for that promise to resolve before nexting it again. They can do things concurrently to do them faster. But they need a way to know how concurrently they can do things. A dumb way would be to just give them like a number, right? You can say 5, and it can have 5 concurrent promises that have not resolved yet. But then the question comes up, well, what if I have some number of resources and I want to share them across like a bunch of non-coordinating consumers, right? I have like 3 different sums going on, and I only have 10 resources. That's a global limit of 10, but I can't. But I want them to use them optimally. You can. So we introduced semaphore, where you just pass the semaphore, a semaphore of 10 to the same semaphore to a bunch of different consumers, and then they will share that limited resource, meaning they will only be as concurrent as that semaphore allows them to be. And then going one step further, we've generalized that to governors, which is so if semaphore is just like a simple counter, governors are a way for us to over time dynamically change that limit, because there are things like APIs that where the concurrency limit changes over time, or there people want to do like anti-dogpiling things like exponential backoff. So that's how we support more like very general forms of concurrency limiting or concurrency descriptions. So that's the concurrency control proposal in 3 minutes.
Let me ask a question. Yeah. So in general, when people outside of JavaScript say words like concurrency and semaphore, they're doing it in the context of fine-grained interleaving, i.e. shared memory multi-threading or something similarly fine-grained. I take it that in this conversation and in your proposal, we're still just talking within the context of event loop concurrency.
That's right. Yes.
Okay.
And I got that same feedback from V8 already, and they would prefer that we rename semaphore to counting governor, which I'm fine with, because there are connotations with semaphore that you're doing some kind of locking, or as you say, fine grain.
Good.
Yes.
Good. I agree with that.
Yeah. So I'm happy to say that the counting governor, which is the most common one that you'll use, is does not have those connotations, and that's the name we can use.
Do you fall through? Do you make it easy to just use a number in place of a counting?
Yes, and that's described in the README. Any place where a governor is expected, which is like all of these consuming helpers, an integer can be provided instead. And so instead of like constructing a new counting governor with an integer, a common case would be just like, I want 5, right? My concurrency is 5. So you can just pass 5, and it'll treat it just like you passed a new counting governor with 5.
This is interesting, but I don't think it's necessary to. I think that you've assuaged any concerns pertaining to security.
Yes, hopefully that it has no special security interests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you certainly addressed my concerns.
I have used async iterators as governors in the past, which is an interesting.
Using an async iterator itself as a governor for another, yeah, we had thought along those lines. I think that's probably. I think governor is a fine abstraction.
Yeah, if you use an async iterator as a governor, then of course you can use phrases like "who will govern the governors."
Yeah, you just become like in lockstep with the other one, and yeah, you still have to say like, well, now exactly who's limiting the advancement of that one, right? Like that somewhere somebody's gonna be in control of it.
Yeah, it's the interesting thing about an async iterator is that it has both forward and backward signals, which is exactly what you need for a governor. You need to have, and you can incidentally use the resolution of the next promise, or the resolution of the thing passed to next as a signal of availability.
We formally acknowledge that the iterator protocol, that iterator helpers only preserve the iterator protocol, not the generator protocol, meaning that iterators produced by both the sync iterator helpers and async iterator helpers don't actually have forward and backward messaging.
They don't have. Let me just clarify. They don't have. Next doesn't take an argument, which is the sense in which you can't communicate data backward.
Argument is not forwarded to the underlying iterator.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't.
But on the control dimension, the async iterator protocol inherently has both forward and backward control information, without getting anywhere close to generators.
I mean,
they
don't do anything with it.
They don't do anything with the data channel, but they do use. You mentioned already that they wait for the resolution of the promise returned by next before calling next in the base case in order to preserve the serial ordering, and the concurrent an effective concurrency limit of 1.
That was the design before we split async iterator helpers out from the sync iterator helpers.
Okay, so in the new design with async iterators split, what's different?
So the new design acknowledges that if the underlying iterator supports concurrent nexting, that the generator, so the produced iterator should also support that.
Which is to say that if a consumer draws 2 concurrent iterations from a map async iterator, it will drive the map async iterator will drive 2 nexts from.
That's right. And that wasn't originally the design. Originally, when we just had them both going through at the same time, they were just dumb, and they were using the queuing behavior of a generator based implementation. If you base these on generators, no matter how many times you next the mapped one, it will only ever have one concurrent next going to the underlying one.
Right. So the consumer can. So if the consumer respects the serial consumption, then the entire chain is going to be consumed serially.
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, but I would still describe that as there are control signals going in both directions.
Yeah, there are. It's just being respected in a different way. It's also interesting It's also interesting because I think in your new formulation, when you increase the concurrency limit, if there's variance in the amount of time it takes to resolve independent iteration results, you do not necessarily, that you lose your ordering guarantees, right?
No, that's a separate proposal, which I'll be adding to the agenda before Friday. So we were also, as and again, you should look at the slides. I have like a nice little diagram. We were also considering how we can optimize the concurrency that async iterator helpers can provide, and that would be through dropping that order constraint. And we had talked about a bunch of like possible ways to do that, because you do want an option that does not drop the order constraint, but dropping the order constraint is probably going to be very common. You know, a lot of times when you consume an async iterator, you're not going to care what order they come in as long as all of it goes through your transform or whatever it is, whatever way you're consuming it. And so we deferred that. We also pulled any unordered async iteration out of that proposal as well, again, to get it over the line, right? And that's now split off into its own proposal as well, which I'll be asking for stage 1 for at the upcoming meeting.
Okay, so you have a sequence of proposals that are coherent with each other, and yeah, that gradually increase the range of expressible async iterators.
Yes.
Okay.
And not just me. There's a bunch of people.
Yeah.
That's
a deficiency of the language. That was a plural you.
Oh, it was a plural you. Okay. Okay.
With regard to async zip, the two obvious forms of async zip would be, all of A before any of B, and the other one is non-deterministic interleaving as things get ready. So it's locally order preserving, but a non-deterministic interleaving between the streams being zipped together.
Yes.
Well,
okay.
In any case, you can look forward to folks on this call taking an interest in your proposal. And so far, it looks like you're on the right track.
But yeah, the all of those are only concerned with that like MVP set that we identified. So like zip is not part of that. We will still be pursuing async zip and having concurrency support in it, but like that will be a different thing. This is right now just addressing the MVP.
I'm curious, since you're here, did you choose to use different method names for the async parodies of synchronous methods? Like
no, they are the same.
It's map for async map.
No. So yeah, there's iterator.prototype, which has all of those MVP methods on them, and then there's async iterator prototype, which has those same names of methods. And on iterator.prototype, there's a toAsync method that gives you an async one. On async iterator, as part of the next proposal to introduce unordered async iterator helpers, on the async iterator prototype, there will be a .unordered, and then that will give you an unordered async iterator prototype with, again, all of the same method names.
Oh.
So you can have like a sync iterator. You can say .toAsync,
and then unordered, or just unordered. Okay.
What? Yeah.
Cool. Time's up.
Final, obviously.
Time's up. Gotta go.
Okay. Yeah.
So long. Thanks for all the proposals.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
See you next.
Bye.